Hello, you've tuned to this week's episode of Next Steps Forward, and I'm your host, Chris Meek. As always, it's an honor to have you with us. Our focus is on personal empowerment, a commitment to well-being, and the motivation to achieve more than ever thought possible. And we have another outstanding guest this week. Everyone seems to want a piece of Crystal Washington. In fact, she was once attacked while driving in a convertible by a bird wanting a piece of her afro for its nest. Futurist, author, and Hall of Fame speaker, Crystal Washington equips organizations with the knowledge they need to become future-proof. As a technology strategist and certified futurist, Crystal makes complex artificial intelligence, social media, and app technology easy to understand and accessible for everyday people. And I'm hoping she can help me with this so I don't have to ask my 13-year-old son. Crystal's clients include Fortune 100 companies, including Google, American Express, and Pfizer. As one of Forbes' 50 leading female futurists, she appears weekly on season 2 of the Emmy-nominated show Life 2.0, and she's the author of One Tech Action and the Social Media Why. Crystal Washington, welcome to Next Steps Forward.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here with you.
It's an absolute blast. I'm glad to have you here today. And with an introduction like that, we have to start with the bird attack. Share the details of becoming the target of a nest-building bird. And did it cause you to rethink your hairstyle or just quit riding convertibles? Tell us the details.
I will share this. Ridiculous things happen to me. My family and friends are like, you should be a cartoon character. And so, no, I had, this was when I was in college. I had a convertible, but it was a little raggedy, one that was falling apart, but I had a little convertible. So I felt excited. And I'm driving down a freeway here in Houston called Highway 59, which is extremely busy and fast moving freeway. And traffic starts to slow just a little bit. And my top was down and I have really curly, thick, puffy kind of afro hair. And from nowhere, this bird just dodged down and just started yanking at my hair. So I'm trying to wave at it with one arm as I'm driving down this busy freeway. And it was funny. I was actually going home to visit my parents. And so when I got there, my mom said I was like this shaking mess and my hair looked crazy. And she was like, what happened? I was like, a bird. So no, I didn't rethink anything because I don't learn from those mistakes. Next time. Me and the bird will just have to fight. I'll be ready. Like I would have, it wouldn't be my first rodeo. You know, I'm in Houston, rodeo won't be my first. So the next bird who comes for me, we're going to have to fight.
Do you have like a tennis racket with you now with your convertible? Start swatting at it or something?
I know, right? Just like mace the bird.
There you go. There you go. So for listeners who may not be familiar with your work, how do you define the role of a futurist?
Oh, that's a good question. Because people that don't know think futurists are psychics sometimes. And I always joke and say, my name is Crystal, but I don't have a crystal ball. Futurist work is a lot less sexy than a psychic's. Basically, what we do is we look around and we gather data on trends, on something called signals. Those are even weaker than trends. Those are those little things where we start to see something popping up around us. And we're like, I don't know what this means, but I feel like it means something. We gather all this information together. And we help individuals or organizations or systems, it could be government systems, to anticipate potential futures so that they can avoid or lessen the shock of those futures. So if you think about an analyst, somebody like an economist, the way they work is, let's say this is the past. And then this dot is where we're at now. And there's a dot, dot, dot where we think we're going. They find a point on that dot and they say, oh, on this date, we think the stock market will do this, or we think that our industry will do this. That's not what futurists do, although we work with them oftentimes. What we do is, here's the past, the present's this dot, there's this dot, dot, dot. We actually gather enough data to plot out 2 to 3 other dot, dot, dots that people aren't expecting, but might actually be more possible and plausible. And that way, organizations can either have plan B, C, and D, or they can actually start doing things to diversify so that they're more future-proof, if you will. So we're basically big nerds. We collect a lot of data and analyze a lot of data, and we're imaginative too.
But with companies like Google, which is one of your clients, I mean, they've got more data than anybody on the planet. I mean, they know all my passwords. They know all the websites I've gone to, or I know, like if I click on a pair of sneakers, all of a sudden I go to another website and there's a banner ad for a pair of sneakers.
Yeah.
Why would they need to have a third party, and outsource to somebody like you?
Good question. Now, when Google brought me in, that wasn't so much for a foresight project. It was a little bit more for a social media project, because I used to do more, and I still do some of this, the future of technology. So showing them how they could leverage social media in some innovative ways. That's the same way that Microsoft used me. And this was when they were still trying to figure out some new strategies for reaching specific markets.
So as somebody who's professionally in finance, what stock should I be buying now? What's the future look like for the market?
Oh, you know what's interesting? So futurists, we fight against this. We always say that we don't do predictions, even though we often do predictions, but that's not what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to paint potential futures so that people can plan for the possibility of that whole future. Does that make sense?
It does.
But I will say that my foresight has definitely helped me in some of my stock choices.
Good for you.
There's that, right? I got into Bitcoin. I'm not suggesting anyone else do that, but I got into Bitcoin when it was at $2,800. And I got out a while ago, but I did great. And I was like, oh, I'm not greedy and I know what this is. So I left. So it does come in handy. But again, I don't think we look at ourselves so much as analysts. We help people open their minds to the possibilities of what's very likely, because the challenge is that the way the human brain is set up, we have a very hard time conceptualizing the future. Most people think of the future as now with a few tweaks to it. And that's not what it is. If you think about 20 years ago, none of us would have foreseen the future we're in 2026, right? Doesn't matter if we agree, disagree with things that are going on, but we could have never seen this, right? But there's some futurist papers that actually touch on a lot of things that are happening right now, even from then. So that's what if that helps, it helps people imagine beyond where their limitations are.
Well,
but again, it's not just sci-fi.
Sure.
Although some of us do sci-fi too, but that's another story, another nerdy story.
Well, and you think about it, who'd have thought that, in today's world, we'd have these smartphones that are mini computers in our pockets.
Yeah.
And I'll show my age. When I was a kid, there was a cartoon called The Jetsons.
Yeah.
And they would talk to each other on a TV and see each other. And then there was an old cartoon called Dick Tracy, who was a spy, and he had a watch where he could see people. And now we've got those, and this stuff happens.
Well, but you know what's interesting? There is a direct line between sci-fi and technology innovation, and many people don't know that. And so what happens is a lot of the technology that's being created did not originate with engineers and technicians. It originated in the minds of sci-fi. And then what happens is when you have people that are trained in these wonderful disciplines, that seed has been planted. So they start to think, how do I make this happen? So for instance, if you think about the heads-up displays inside of cars now, that's RoboCop in the 80s. If you think about Wikipedia, this encyclopedia of everything, that's Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy from the 70s. When you're thinking about kind of these robot human hybrids, that's the sci-fi movie Metropolis, it was a movie, in the late 1920s. So most of the technology we have now was dreamed up in sci-fi, which lets you know that anybody can be an innovator. You don't have to be the one creating the technology. You just have to open your mind up to the possibilities.
That's fascinating. This is like an aha moment for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I like to pride myself in the show being a first, and you're definitely the first futurist I've had on here.
Ooh.
What inspired you to become a futurist, and how did your journey into this field begin?
I didn't start off thinking I'd be a futurist. I thought I'd be a business major. And I think this course kind of chose me. So I'm someone who, as a baby, I was given a lot of puzzles. For whatever reason, my parents so I could do pretty complex puzzles before I could talk, right? I tend to see how things fit together. The way I think is such that I can see things as possibilities maybe that other people don't see. So when I went to school, I didn't end up being a business major. I was a hospitality major because that major offered me a free ride and extra money. So I understood no debt. I know you're in finance. I got that. I was like, you know what? It's a business degree where you have to like people. I can do it. But when I was working in the field as a manager, there was this little thing called social media that was at its infancy. And so this is when MySpace was still around and Facebook was still open to just college students. And I went to my boss, who was a couple generations beyond me. And I said, hey, I have a feeling this social media thing is going to be really big. I said, it's only a matter of time before companies get on here. Now we're like, duh, but it hadn't happened yet. This is the early 2000s. And I said, as part of my job, you should let me just take this on as a little project to figure out how we can leverage this in the business. And Chrissy looked at me and he said, look, kid, you're cute, and you make us a bleep load of money. And he didn't say bleep. He said, stick to what you know. And I said, oh. And so I did a very millennial thing. I quit my job and I started a digital marketing firm because everything in me said that that was going to be huge. And I started with mom and pops. And then I actually ended up getting some bigger corporate pieces. But my point is, through time, I could kind of see what was possible, where people were likely going to go. I could also see the popular technology that wasn't going to take off. And so when I tell people certain things, like during COVID, I had so many clients that were like, oh, we're purchasing this real estate in the metaverse. And I was like, oh, and I was trying to explain to them why they shouldn't do this thing, right? Or I don't know if you remember when Google had their social network, was it G Plus or Google Plus?
Mm-hmm.
And I was explaining why that could not spread past a certain point. And people were nailing me, like, these are all these experts, and Guy Kawasaki said. So I could always see what was coming next, but I didn't really understand foresight until I was on the stage as a speaker, speaking on technology, future of how people think. And I had a humanoid robot on the stage with me. And we were walking through what's happening to humans and the relations to robots. And at the end, a woman named Joyce Joya, who is a foundational futurist, because foresight really came about in the late 60s, early 70s as a real discipline. She caught me after stage. She hugged me and she said, "You're a futurist. Did you know that?" And I was like, "What's that?" And she was like, "Come get an education." And so she had me sign up for courses, University of Houston, which has the longest running program in the world. And it started from there. So I gave you a very long answer. I didn't start off being a futurist. I just started off being me. But I'm someone that could always see what was likely going to happen that people weren't prepared for. And then I could see the hype that people were preparing for, where I was like, this doesn't fit with human psychology, or this doesn't work with adaptation rates, right? So I think I just found my tribe of people that think like me is ultimately what happened.
And that doesn't happen to a lot of folks. And so that's, it's an amazing journey. What does your day-to-day work look like? And what does a futurist actually do every day? And what's an average day, if there is such a thing as an average day?
So futurist days look very different because there are people, and I have friends that are corporate futurists, so they work within specific companies. Some of them work in the government. I have a friend that works for the government in Australia, right? And they all do different things. Now, the way it shows up for me is I'm actually a keynote speaker. I speak on the future of technology. And I did that before I had the title of futurist, because I understood technology well. It started with the social media and blossomed into other things. But for me, I don't have a typical day, but I'll give you 2 different days, what they might look like, the 2 that I have most often. I'm either on the road and speaking. So in which case, oftentimes I'm kicking off a conference. I'm waking up somewhere. Oftentimes during busy season, I'm looking out the window to try to remember where I'm at. I'm like, there's a mountain. Okay, I'm not here. Maybe, snow. I'm getting ready. I'm doing an AV check, going on stage in front of a few hundred people, afterwards staying around answering questions, hopping on another plane, going to the next location. So that's one of my days. The days when I'm working from home, that's typically a lot more research. So sometimes I'm having calls with clients that are interested in bringing me in. Sometimes I'm having calls with clients who have already engaged me for a speaking engagement, and we're going through content. I'm going into tools like Raindrop.io, where I'm collecting signals and pieces of data that'll help inform some of my talks or my projects. Right now, I'm actually back in school again, because big nerd that I am. So I'm getting a master's in foresight right now. So Mondays and Tuesdays, I'm in classes for a few hours in the evening. But my day's kind of free flow. So if I'm in the office, research, talking to clients, sometimes team meetings, because I do have a team of 7 people. And then when I'm on the road, it's me engaging with a few hundred people, sometimes thousands of people, and trying to make topics that people have a lot of stress around, technology in the future, more digestible, and really empowering them to show them how they can get ahead of a lot of things that are happening.
So what are your personal thoughts? These are just your personal thoughts. I'm not going to hold you anything about AI right now. It's, obviously the thing. NVIDIA's been leading the charge. We've had a few, I won't say newcomers, but a few more people kind of stepping into the realm. Mm-hmm. And it's the second half, maybe the fourth quarter of last year, we saw sort of this vicious cycle of each of them investing into each other. Here's $100 billion. Here's $100 billion. Here's $100 billion. Mm-hmm. And from my perspective, it seems like a shell game. Now, we know AI works, and there's ChatGPT, there's Gemini, there's Grok, there's all that stuff, and it works, and it's amazing. It's a little scary. But at the same time, in the investing side and the finance, the balance sheet side,
Mhm.
100 billion, 100 billion, 100 billion. Like, I'll give it to you, you give it to me, you give it to me. And we just kind of keep passing that around. But then the market goes up and up and up. Oh, they're investing, they're investing. Personal thoughts on that?
Personal thoughts.
Yes.
Like if I was talking in a room full of my friends, right? Is that what we're looking for here?
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to just, based on my experience, but talking to friends. Right now, we're in the midst of what I consider to be an AI hype cycle. The term artificial intelligence is not new. It was invented in the 1950s by a computer scientist named John McCarthy. The calculators that we had in the 1970s, by definition, are artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is just a branch of computer science that allows for machines to do computations that used to require human thought. The reason we're having so much conversation around AI specifically right now is because of generative AI, the programs you mentioned, from ChatGPT to Google Gemini to Grok to all those different ones. They are valuable, and yet they cannot do what many of their CEOs are saying that they can do at this point in time. And so what's happening is, and this happens with many different types of companies, they're being valued on what we think will happen in the future, right? The challenge is that they're running out of data to train their large language models. And so many of them are not actually getting smarter, and they're having to find different types of models to create to try to educate their systems. They're trying to find companies to buy, like publishers and things, and get that good data. Because if you think about it, most of the valuable data in the world has not been digitized. It's in libraries and it lives in experts' brains, and we're innovating all the time. And so I think we're in this very interesting pivotal point where AI is being used more so as a marketing term than actually explaining the technology, because every piece of technology that we have just about is artificial intelligence. And so I would be careful. I would look at what the promises are versus what are the deliverables. I would also look at the human adoption rate of different technologies, because even if some of these technologies could do right now what they're saying they could do, getting people to use it is another story. For instance, the video phone was first made commercially available in the 1960s. Very few people had a visual phone in the 1960s. I remember in commercials when they were trying to push it again in the late 80s, early 90s. I remember seeing the commercial as a kid, and my dad sitting on the couch saying, well, that's stupid. I don't want people looking at me while I'm talking. And my mom was like, what if I have rollers in my hair? Now they're used to having FaceTime with their grandkids, right? If we think about QR codes, those are not new. They were created in the 1990s by Japanese manufacturing companies. But it took us having these things that we're with all the time. It took COVID, because before COVID, many people weren't interested in scanning QR codes. It was all realtors saying you should download this app so you can scan the code as you go past a house. And I'm like, but I'm not buying a house right now. Now that the reader is built into our cameras, and then after COVID, we came back into restaurants and no one wanted to have physical menus. Now even proud Luddites know how to use QR codes. Same thing with video phones. It took it being built in these devices that we sleep with and are addicted to normalize the technology. I say all this to say, when you think about artificial intelligence and the way some of these CEOs, not all, are saying is going to replace humans, how quickly do we think most intelligent humans will help implement technology that's going to replace them? I'm not saying I believe it's going to replace them, but based on the way a couple of these organizations are marketing it, their marketing is, oh, it'll cut cost on your labor. So not only is there a timeline, but people have to feel the desire to leverage a piece of technology. So I say all that to say, I think we should follow it. I think we should look at what the technology currently can and cannot do. I think we have to look at the legal implications, because right now there's a lot of cases in court about how some of these models have misused information, or maybe didn't quite tell the truth on what information they use. And then based on that, I think that we can make sound financial decisions. I would encourage us to look at those types of investments as we would any other type of investment. It's not magic.
So here's where I say the views of our guests are solely of the guests and not of Voice America Media and Chris Meek and Next Steps Forward. So I appreciate the insights on that. And what you said makes a lot of sense. So thank you for taking me down that rabbit hole that I brought you into.
and then gave a disclaimer after I gave my answer. But no, you needed to.
That's okay. And I'm doing that as a joke too. Crystal, how do you research trends in order to reach conclusions about what the future will look like? And what kinds of sources, or like you were talking about earlier, the signals do you pay most attention to?
So futurists, we pull from all kinds of sources. The good thing is many of us, we're in different networks. So oftentimes futurists share information with each other, where you're just like, have you seen this lately? And everybody's like, what? And it may apply to our area of expertise or it may not. So they're the random things that are coming from different people in our groups. But with more intentionality, we look at everything from gray papers. So things like things from like the World Bank or like these huge global organizations. We're tracking things like that. We're tracking work from other futurists. We're tracking industry publications. We're tracking things that are popping up on social media. The information doesn't have to be true to be a signal. Does that make sense what I'm saying? It doesn't have to be factual, because sometimes the signal itself is how people react to a thing or how they're talking about it. We also often dig really deep to find those folks that have 2 or 3 PhDs, but live in their parents' basement, and they have a blog that 16 people read, but they are the real experts. They're just locked in. So we look for those too. So we tend to pull information from different places. We typically also label them. So tagging is really important for futurists. So I don't know who all is familiar with the term horizons. Futurists oftentimes work with horizons, and usually 3. So the first horizon are things that you're already seeing happening now to some degree. Horizon 2 are the things that I can see this coming next. It's going to come next couple of years. And then there's horizon 3 that's a little bit closer to like 10 years out. So you're not really seeing traces of it yet, but it's very plausible based on other things that you're seeing. And then we categorize it all different types of ways. And then we also stick a label on it on how much we trust the source, right? There's levels to that as well. And then based on that, we start to analyze. Sometimes we work in teams. Oftentimes we work in teams. It's better if we work in teams because different people, different life experience, see different things. And from there, a lot of times we'll surface trends. We'll create scenarios to walk clients through so they can start thinking about how they would move in different worlds, if you will. And sometimes we help them design next steps as well, so they can actually start to take action on these alternative futures. But to give you an idea, Shell Oil Company is the first corporation that employed in-house futurists. And they brought them in, I want to say in 1970. And so when there was that energy crisis, I want to say 72, 73, if you look at Shell's performance overall, they took a hit like all energy companies did, but they didn't take as hard a hit. And they actually went up in their ranking in energy companies where other people fell out. So I think they went from like number 7 in the world to number 3, something like that. And it's because from working with the futurists, they had already started to diversify for the possibility of the things that happened a couple years later actually happening. So that's the type of work that we do. It shouldn't just be research. We want people to be able to take action based on it.
Well, in a moment ago, you just mentioned trends. How do you separate short-term trends or even fleeting fads from long-term transformations?
That's a good question. So fads, I think some of it's intuitive for me because I just kind of see how things work, but also you're using psychology, you're using sociology. Like when I talked about human adoption, there's some things that the metaverse thing, for instance, I think that's a good one. I knew that was going to be more of a fad. And people were like, no, it's the next big thing. And everybody's going to be on the metaverse. And it's because people are locked in their house, right? So they wanted connection. I got it. But I was like, no, here's the thing. The average person does not want to put this headset on for hours at a time and sit in meetings. Now, I say this as somebody who is a gamer. So I had Oculuses for years. So I'm used to being in an immersive world. But gamers, the way they process the world typically is pretty different than the average person. They also hadn't gotten the technology to the point where it was there. So they still had this problem, this inner ear problem where people would have, where if they wore those headsets for an extended period of time, you had an incredible case of vertigo, unlike anything you've ever experienced. So, and then also understanding these virtual environments do not allow people to touch, to smell. And so understanding how people work, I knew this is not going to be, this is a money grab. You buying real estate in these virtual worlds. I'm not saying it can't work in any type of situation, but the way it was being presented, and people were spending thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars on virtual real estate. It's not reasonable. And so I think a part of it is, there's a point where we take things through plausibility, kind of a plausibility analysis, and you bring in experts too. Sometimes we're quick to pull in other people. It might be an economist. It might be a psychologist. I have a friend that's a neurologist. Like there've been times where I'll pull them in and say, let me run this by you. And they're like, ooh, no. And they'll give you papers that explain in their industry, like why this is likely not to happen, or say someone did research on this. Just look this over and see how this correlates. So the interesting thing about being a futurist is it requires us to know just enough about many different disciplines to be dangerous. We're not experts, except in our one lane potentially, but we know enough to know how to find more information and to find the experts we need to partner with to help us filter.
What's an example of a technology or a social shift that you thought seemed like a passing fad, but turned out to be deeply transformative?
Oh, let me think. I thought a passing fad, but ended up being transformative.
Maybe
and you said,
wasn't one.
Was this technology?
Yeah. Or anything. A social shift.
I'll be honest with you. The thing that I'm really hard at predicting is toys. So that's probably, because I have little nieces and nephews. And so there's little things that have caught on with aspects of their gaming. Or even kind of here's one. I got one for you. It is technology related. The middleman shoe market that's happening right now, where there's limited edition of these shoes, and then they're jacked up 3-4 times, and people are paying for them, and it happens. Oh, I thought when this first started happening, there's no way, because in the not too many years before, most people might have 2-3 pairs of sneakers at most, right? A lot of people would only have one pair at a time, maybe one that was running and then one was more functional. But I was like, there's no way people are going to get on these marketplaces and pay all this money for these things over and over again. And then they would be these drops, and people drop what they're doing and they run to their phone I was wrong. I was very wrong. So that's one. I think and is it transformative? I think on a certain level, and removing any judgment, it's changed the way some people buy shoes. It's impacted the way people buy other things, because now there's concert drops. So seeing as how successful it was for sneakers, you're seeing people doing that with other things that aren't even tangible. So that's a good one. That's one where I was like, there's no way people are, what?
Yeah, it's insane. And my daughter's become a sneakerhead. I'm not sure how. And this whole concert drop stuff is just out of control.
And see, I'm one of those people, I just kind of refuse. My friends thinks it's funny. My husband does too, where I'm like, I am not playing these psychological games. If I want something and it's available, I get it. But this whole thing, stay tuned, because exactly this hour it's going to open up, and then buying things off a resale, it's not in me. It feels like manipulation, because it is manipulation. And don't get me wrong, we're manipulated all day long. Like everything that we own is designed to manipulate, but not necessarily in a negative way. Manipulation doesn't have to be bad. But for me, that's just one of the few places where I am not meant to see this person in concert. I am not meant to own this article of clothing, because I'm not Pavlov's dog. I'm not judging anybody else. I can't.
Well, I'm laughing as you're saying that. I just realized, so our son is 13. He collects baseball cards. Mm-hmm. And they send you the email. There's going to be a drop on the 14th at noon Eastern. And so I put it in my Outlook calendar to give me the notice at 15 minutes and at 10 minutes and at 5 minutes. And I've got the website up and I've got the credit card loaded, and I click it 12 in 1 second, sold out.
I feel like, and I could be wrong, I feel like maybe this is a little signal, a little thing we start to listen to. There's a connection between that, the rise of sports betting, the gamification of so many different activities. So I'm not saying all these things are bad, but I feel like this whole gamification model and this forced scarcity model, like them being combined, is very much related and tapping into our dopamine and all of those different receptors. But the challenge is that when you think about dopamine mixed with adrenaline, that's the recipe for addiction. And so we're seeing so many of the things that we have in everyday life being made addictive, which I think we have to think about, what does that future look like?
And you mentioned earlier in the show about the phone, and so that's a whole nother conversation.
Yes, yes, it is. And I have people argue. They're like, "No, I'm not addicted to my phone." I have all these jokes around it. I'm like, just own it. Own it.
Every Sunday morning, my watch tells me how long I was on my phone for the previous week, so I know
Yeah.
exactly.
But we can also disconnect when we choose. So, for instance, I'm somebody, I've worn a Fitbit for 5 years. I stopped wearing one about 2 months ago, as you're required to start to put everything into Google now. I'm like, I do enough with Google. Google doesn't need that data on me. I'm fine. So, I mean, we can choose to cut off. I haven't bought anything from Amazon. I want to say maybe in about 10 months. So we can choose. And there's some things I keep, right? So we get to choose.
I need you to talk to my wife about the whole Amazon thing.
Well, if I can do it, anybody can. I was more on the extreme end. Okay, you want to talk about technology? I love efficiency. And years ago, my husband and I went to Japan for the first time. And for anyone that's listening who hasn't been, they have those incredible toilets there, right? So the toilets, they heat water. Some of them have songs on them, blow dryer. It's an experience, right? So when I got back from Japan, and I'm talking to my husband, I said, I just don't know if American toilets do it for me anymore. And he's like, wait, what? So I flew out the next day, which is what I do all the time for speaking engagement. But when I got back the following day, I opened up the door, a bunch of Amazon packages, which is normal, and my husband's judgy face on the other side of those packages. And he's like, what is this big package? And I said, oh, wait, you see. And as I start to open it, he said, you did not order a Japan toilet. I said, I did. So tell your wife, if somebody who had that level of addiction where she's ordering Japan potties via Amazon can give it up, anybody can, if they so choose. That's not everyone's journey, right? We get to all choose what we're supposed to do and what works for us.
And on that note with Japan potties, we're going to take a break. We've been talking to Crystal Washington, and we'll be right back after a short break. Please stay with us. We are back. I'm Chris Meek, host of Next Steps Forward. And my guest today is Crystal Washington, futurist, author, Hall of Fame speaker, and owner of a Japan potty. Crystal equips organizations with the knowledge they need to become future-proof. As a technology strategist and certified futurist, Crystal makes complex artificial intelligence, social media, and app technology easy to understand and accessible for everyday people. Crystal's clients include Fortune 100 companies, including Google, American Express, and Pfizer. As one of Forbes' 50 leading female futurists, she appears weekly on season 2 of the Emmy-nominated show Life 2.0, and she's the author of One Tech Action and the Social Media Why. Crystal, before the break, we've been talking about big trends, transformational change, and your work as a futurist. Let's talk about how future developments are going to affect our audience's day-to-day lives. I mentioned you're a sought-after speaker. You often talk about disruption as both a challenge and an opportunity. Would you share an example or two about disruption we're likely to face and the challenges and opportunities that disruption will bring?
Sure. Oh, there's so many. But I'll give you one that people aren't really thinking about so much, but it came up in a very recent presentation of mine because it would totally shift how their industry works. And that's climate migration. Now, I want to start off by saying this. When we talk about climate migration, some people think it's climate warming. Some people, global warming, some people think that it's, 100-year cycles. All of that's above my pay grade. I don't know why it's happening. I'm not even here to discuss it, right? That's not even the point. We just know things are changing, right? And as a result, people are moving from certain areas to others. So as you're seeing more wildfires in certain areas, people are moving away from that. As you're seeing ocean temperatures get a little bit higher and you're seeing more hurricanes in certain areas, people are moving away from that. And so thinking about the fact that there is a very real possibility your grandchildren may not be living in the city you're living in. It might be less livable. It might be more prone to natural disasters. And so what does that mean for your work? What does that mean for companies? Because some of them already are starting to think about how they move their offices, where their offices need to go. what hybrid work looks like, because there's this kind of back and forth yo-yo over is hybrid good, if it's not, why is it necessary, why isn't it? But even again, just prepping your children and grandchildren for this world in which where their parents live, their grandparents live, might not be the best viable solution. What does that look like? And what does that mean for compression in certain areas? What if you are in one of the highly livable zones that's less likely to be impacted by climate migration in any country, right? So I think that's a big one. And it's not a comfortable one to think about, right? Like no one wants to think, oh no, what does this mean for my insurance? What does this mean for my investments? Think about that. It would touch every part of our lives, but it's already starting to happen. And people aren't seeing it yet. I mean, people that study this are seeing it. And futurists are seeing it because we have to remember enough about a whole bunch of little things to be dangerous, but that affects people. So that's one we have to think about. And I know with as many things is on people's minds right now, there's somebody listening that's cursing me like, why is she adding to my angst? But the point is not for any of these things to overtake us or make us depressed or anything like that. I'm a big fan of you consider the possibilities and you prep against them. And when you prep against them, then you can relax more. So, Chris, if I can give you a personal example of this, I want to be super clear. I am not a doomsday prepper. I can't say that enough. But what I am is someone who considers the possibilities. And so I live in Houston, Texas, which gets hurricanes, right? And so I'm someone who I have a hurricane stockpile, right? It's not an incredible amount of food, but it is food in my pantry that's good for a minimum of 2 weeks, a little bit longer than that, that's designated for that, right? And tons of water for that period of time, and a backup whole home generator and all these different things. But before I had the generator, when I just had all the supplies, some of my family members, more extended, would crack jokes about, oh, Chris, here's Crystal again. She's getting this, she's getting that. She's got the extra this and that. And it was all fun and games until we had that Houston freeze a couple years ago. And what was happening here, if anyone is unaware, much of the city lost power. And a good portion of the city had pipes that were burst because we were not set up for those types of temperatures. Our infrastructure is for wind, for hurricanes, not for freezes. And so what happened in essence was I had family members that all had to come to my house. Now we had electricity. The water turned off literally as one of the family members arrived. So our water was working and then all of our water stopped. But because I had such a stockpile, everybody had more than enough food. Because my husband's a germaphobe and I stockpile against that, we had an insane amount of wipes. I'm sure those children never want to see another wipe again. They're taking white baths. We're going to be clean no matter what. They have white baths. We had tons of water. And so that's when I tell people I prepare against things, not to be paranoid. I'm not sitting with this possibility all the time, but you have it as insurance, the same way you have insurance, right? I have car insurance, home insurance, disability insurance. I'm self-employed, so I'm paying for these insurances myself. A lot of self-employed people don't pay for disability insurance, but it's a wise thing to do when your body is part of what is, how you make your money. And so I think that's how we should look at the future. Don't be afraid to think if something could happen, you're being negative and you're bringing it about. No. If it's plausible, if it's possible and even plausible, I would suggest thinking about how you can prepare against it, do what you need to do, and then you can sit back and relax. And if the thing strikes, the monster comes, you already have the bat hit the monster in the head. You're okay.
Well, as you're talking about that, and before the show, you and I were talking about weather here in the Northeast. And a couple weekends ago, we had that big blizzard. And I live in a little bit of the country, but we have a generator because we do have power goes out. And so I was prepared. We've got the gas for the generator, started to make sure it was already running. We had to have food stockpiled because we've got high winds and 18 inches of snow. And so it's not doomsday to your point. It's just being prepared.
You're prepping. That's it. You just have things in place. And I just think, and don't get me wrong, sometimes our solutions are different. I'll give you a funny example. I don't think I've ever shared this, but I'll share it with you because I think it's funny. One of my siblings cannot swim very well. She can float. And one day I was shaming her because I was like, look, you have to take swimming lessons. I've been telling you this forever. You have your 2 children. I got your oldest child swimming lessons. He's the best swimmer in the family now, but you have this little one. What are you going to do if there's another flood and you can't get out? Like, are your children going to die because you can't swim? So I was really laying it on thick because at this point I said it nicely over years. So I'm trying to hit home. This is my younger sibling too. So I knew I could just, And I could see her face, like she was convicted, right? So now she's considering this possibility that she didn't want to consider. So when I came over next time, she was like, Crystal, I thought about what you said and I'm ready to take action. I've already taken action. So I'm like, oh my gosh, you signed up for swimming lessons? She said, no. Oh, Chris. She pulled up these 2 packages. They're huge inflatable swans. Like the ones you see like when people on vacations, but they're huge. And she was like, look, we're on the 2nd floor. I keep them here, the same floor where we have like the pump for the air mattresses. She said, so what we can do is I put it out the window right here. You see where the ledge is? I blow it up, put the babies. Now we're on our swans and we'll live.
Because she's going to have electricity to blow up the pumps, right?
Okay. I don't know. But here's the thing. If there's ever a flood in Houston and anyone that's listening sees a woman going down the street with some kids and 2 blow up swans, just know it's my sister. My point is, all jokes aside, while her solution wasn't my solution, at least it got her thinking about the possibilities. So she has something she's comfortable with. And maybe she'll upgrade in the future. That's my hope, that my little nieces and nephews aren't floating around in swans. But if not, she does have some plan. And that's what we have to do. So get your inflatable swans together is what I'm encouraging everyone to do.
So speaking of your nieces and nephews, every generation is different. And in part, of course, because of the technology of the day and many other factors, including pink swans. How do you see ongoing generational shifts and specifically the emergence of the Gen Z and Gen Alpha reshaping the future of work and communication?
Well, there's a couple things that I personally find interesting that I've noticed. One, their communication is different. So most other generations, I'm a millennial, I'm an old millennial, so I'm almost a Gen X, but I'm still a millennial. Most other generations, when you're a teenager, you're awkward. That's just how it works. But you learn to get over it. You learn to communicate with other people. Someone taught you how to shake hands. Someone made you uncomfortable by coming to talk to your face, maybe someone your own age, and you just kind of have to look at them because you feel dumb looking at your shoes. You have to move through it. Some of the younger people are so connected to technology and they don't necessarily have older people working with them. And so I have watched people, teenagers right now and middle schoolers, have conversations with each other where they're not making eye contact. I had the experience last year of going to one of my nephew's open houses for high school. And they had an area where they had the older kids with booths for all the different clubs. And so I'm like, okay, let's go around to each club, talk to all the kids. And I noticed something super fascinating. What I'm sharing is not a trend. This is not quantitative data. This is my observation from one event in one place in one school. But it aligns with some other things I've seen. As we went around to the booths, the girls would kind of talk to us. The boys would talk, but none of them made eye contact. This happened at least 13 times. And I thought it was so strange. And my nephew, who we've worked with, he'd stick out his hand to shake their hand. They give him a lip handshake and then talk to the left of his face. So I think the way they communicate, some of them, it's not all, some of them are going to have a hard time with communicating with other people as they get older, college and work age. And then the other thing is many of them are not impressed by technology in the same way. The technology they use, they want it to be a little bit more integrated into their lives. But the technology itself, it's not like, ooh, this is the technology. And many of them are not a fan of putting all their stuff out there. I'm a millennial. I'm from the generation that saw social media as our own personal reality show. And I'm going to show you my life. And it's fabulous. I'm going to put the best pictures and use all of these filters. I'm going to look great. What we're finding with younger generations is most of them don't want to be connected to a bunch of strangers, number one. So they're less likely to allow a bunch of people to follow them. The stuff that they put up is curated, but it's usually curated to be funny or weird. So they're taking pictures from weird angles. So it's not like, ooh, she's beautiful. It's like, what is that? And so their relationship to technology is very different. They're typically not afraid of it because they're born with it. They're born into a world where Amazon delivers whatever you want to your door within 24 hours, but they're not impressed by it. And the type of attention many of them are seeking is different, although some of them do want to be influencers, right? So it's a very different mindset. They're native to it. They embrace some pieces of it, but they reject some of the very things that made older generations think it was cool.
Do you ever think that an influencer would be a career?
Thinking this through, I want to give a good answer. I mean, we've always had influencers, but they were typically celebrities.
Right.
And so what social media has done is it's democratized. So, I mean, if you think about it, William Shatner has advertised everything under the sun, except feminine products. I feel like that's the last place. Literally, there's nothing that man won't promote. But Shaq is the same way now, right? But the interesting thing about influencers, though, is they're supposed to be seen as everyday people, at least the micro influencers. The challenge with this is that many of them don't make the money that some celebrities do, but some of them are trying to project that same lifestyle, so it's not sustainable. The other challenge is that I am finding that some of them are falling into some of the same traps that maybe youth did in show business. So they're kind of being eaten up by it. People aren't thinking about the emotional toll of putting yourself out there like that. So we live in very interesting times.
Well said. Well said. All right, so let's talk about your books. In One Tech Action, you encourage readers to become more intentional with technology, and you've described the book as a guide to, quote, digital transformation for everyday people. It's structured around simple tech actions readers can take daily. What's one example of a small tech action that can make a big impact?
So I want to start off by saying I don't recommend anyone get the book now because it's a technology-based book that was written years ago. So unless you want to get some legacy information, there you go. But something that everyone can do right now, One Tech Action, is as you hear about a new piece of technology that's interesting, like if you're listening to us and maybe you've never heard of Google Gemini or Perplexity or something we're mentioning, make it a habit to go on your calendar and schedule 10 minutes to look it up. If you don't have time right now, just from time to time, you should have at least one of those on your schedule a week, or let's say 4 months. It doesn't always fall, a week apart, where you're just looking up things that you don't understand. And here's my thing. Let's use generative AI for that. So let's say a topic is super complicated and you don't understand it, right? Let's say you wanted to look at, while it's not as hot a topic now, non-fungible tokens, NFTs, right, as an investment vehicle. A lot of people didn't understand what it was. Go to ChatGPT and ask the question, or say, I don't understand what an NFT is. Can you explain it to me like I'm a 10-year-old who loves baseball? So you can even give them the thing that they can actually explain it through and watch it explain it to you so that you understand it at your level. So I'm really big at telling people, use generative AI to explain things and help it relate to you.
That's perfect. Let's talk about your other book. You wrote The Social Media Why to help professionals better understand the purpose behind their online presence. Why was the quote, why, so important to emphasize?
Oh, because people were just doing it. You hear other people saying, oh, I'm on this thing. It's the best thing since sliced bread. And then people sign up and they get sucked in and they start posting pictures of their children or data that probably shouldn't be there, or family arguments or misinformation. And they don't even know why they're there. So my whole thing is, if you're going to do something, be intentional, because your time is valuable. The time that you spend on social media is time that you could spend on personal development, time spent with family, time volunteering, time taking a nap. Naps are underrated and so important, right? And so that's why it was important for me to talk about the why piece of it, because so much was being done without intention. And we see now what that's doing, because we have become the product, right? We're not being sold anything. It's our attention that's being sold. And so if you don't know why you're there, it's very easy for you to get hooked into a thing. And you're not using it, it's using you.
And just to follow up on your nap statement, I actually read an article last week that's been scientifically proven that a 15-minute nap is better for your brain health and your overall sleeping habits. And it's not the 60 or 90-minute nap where you're zonked out, because then you won't sleep as much at night. But you lay down, you take a 10 to 20-minute nap. Yeah. You're good to go.
I love naps. I'm a fan of sleep. I encourage everyone to get sleep. That the grind culture we're seeing now, where people are like, oh, you wake up at 4 a.m. and you sleep and you dead. If you talk to anybody that studies the brain or human body, you're going to be dead soon. Like, you can't, it's not sustainable. It's not a sustainable model.
When you're not focused on the future, you're an adventurous travel fanatic in the present. Now, this story I need some details on. I understand that you once followed a random barefooted mountain man with a machete up an active volcano. Luckily, you survived that adventure. Where did that happen, and how the hell did you end up there, and why?
Let me ask you a question. How many minutes do we have? Because this is a story.
We've got about 3.
Okay. My husband's friend was getting married in St. Vincent. My husband was hired as his photographer because my husband owns an international photography company. A couple days before the wedding, the groom announced that the women would be going to the spa. The men would be climbing Mount Soufri there, the active volcano. And I thought to myself, that stinks. I can go to a spa at home. I said, hey, I'm okay with you saying no, but would it be possible for me to come with the guys? And he was like, sure, no problem. 2 other women decided to come as well. All right. So it's the day we're supposed to be going up, hiking up this thing. The driver arrives to get us that night, or no, early in the morning. It's dark. He says, where is your tour guide? The groom says, we don't have one. And the guy said, wait, no. People die on this. And he was like, no, my uncle lives here. He told me the way. So the drivers were heading up. I'm looking at my husband. My husband's like, as we're heading up, the driver keeps trying to convince the groom, no, I can stop in the town. I can literally find somebody for you. You don't want to do this yourself. The groom's like, we're fine. Okay. So we get to the part where he's supposed to drop us off. The man's like, please. And the groom's like, nope, we're fine. And I'm like, this is such a bad decision I'm making. We begin to follow this man up the mountain, the volcano. As we're walking up this volcano, at one point, the side of our walkway falls off. So if you slip to the side, you fall about 200 feet and die. We keep walking. At one point, the other part falls away. So there's a skinny strip. If you fall in either direction, you die. At this point, we're making a chain. We got to the point where we're slipping around because it's rainforest. The ground is wet. My husband and I even developed this saying, I'd keep catching him or he'd catch me. And we'd say, you go, I go. There's this really sweet blonde girl behind me. She slipped. I caught her. And she said, I go, you go. I said, oh, no, sweetheart. If he goes, I go. You go, I tried. But I needed her to be a little more careful. We finally get back to land where it's kind of like this way. We get a little rest. We've been walking for about 30 minutes. We're all sitting down, thinking about our life decisions. Suddenly, in the brush behind us, we see the trees move. A man comes through, matted hair, machete in his hand, barefoot. I don't know how to explain this. Maybe it's the futurist. When I saw him, I thought, oh my God, thank God. All the guys jumped up, ready to fight. The man said, hey, I ran into a driver who said there's some crazy Americans who are about to die up here. And we were like, yes. And the groom was like, we don't need your help. And I was like, yes, we do. There's one guy who had a pack of bread. He had made sandwiches in between, so he just put all the bread back. He said, I don't have any money, but I have sandwiches. And the man was like, I'll take your sandwiches. And I was like, I have a bag of granola. He said, I'll take your granola. And he led us up the mountain.
That is fantastic. In 2 minutes or less, give us something that makes you feel empowered and resilient and a reason to go forward.
Oh, me, empowered and resilient. 2 things. I think a lot of people search for purpose in life. I've known mine for a really long time. I'm a bridge between generations. I know my ancestors' stories. I've traced it back 9 generations before me. So I know all the different folks that came from West Africa and Haiti and different parts of Europe and Native Americans. And my role is to be a bridge between the past and the future. So I'm the most active aunt anyone's ever seen. Like, I have a huge house with me and my husband because we always have nieces and nephews over. And so transferring between these 2 periods of time is super important to me. And it keeps me motivated because I see how it helps the next generation. But I also enjoy sharing this with other people, that there's knowledge from our past that can help us move through our present. There's a lot of change happening in the world right now, but I feel like I have a really good playbook to go by. And helping them reach out to the next generation, I think, is so important because right now we don't have as much community as we used to have in most parts of the world. And so helping people figure out how to ground our young people and inspire them, and then also pass on that playbook, is so important. So anything about the past, anything about the future, it makes me excited because I see we're in this really beautiful middle range where we can influence the future by pulling the best pieces of our past.
Crystal Washington, it's been an absolute honor and pleasure having you with you. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Chris.
I'm Chris Meek. We're out of time. We'll see you next week, same time, same place. Until then, stay safe